Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our final educational track session of the Legal Week Year May series, which is hosted by Veritone. Before we get into the session, we have a couple of housekeeping notes. This session is CLE accredited, so please pay attention to this important information. The CLE code will be placed in the session chat at the appropriate time. In order to obtain CLE credit, you will need to take note of this code. Additionally, we encourage as much interactivity as possible, so please do send in your questions for the panel via the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Now back to the program. This session is titled Real-World AI Applications Transforming eDiscovery, and here to provide their very own insights on this topic are our panel of experts. Please welcome Corinna Soto, Account Executive, Veritone; Joy Morau, Founder and CEO, Practice Aligned Resources; Ben Ha, Senior Sales Engineer, Government, Legal, and Compliance, Veritone. Corinna, the virtual stage is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen with you all. Very excited to be here today. So let me go ahead and share this. I hope you guys can all see everything. We're going to go ahead and start off with a poll question today as we start to talk a little bit more about real-world AI applications that are transforming eDiscovery. So please go ahead and ignite the poll. The poll question is, what are your impressions when someone mentions AI to you? Got 20 seconds to go and answer that. We're really excited about this conversation today.
I can't vote.
I know, we can't vote. Okay. Looks like about 11% think that it's like the Terminator and Skynet, about 83% of you think it's simple machine algorithms, and 6% of you think it's software hackers taking into everything and taking over the world. So I'm really excited. That's really great. And so we're going to go ahead and jump into it. So let's go ahead and get started. So what is artificial intelligence? What is AI? AI refers to the simulation of human intelligence in machines that are programmed to think like humans and mimic their actions. Some cognitive human intelligence that AI is supporting today include things like visual perception, speech recognition, decision-making, or the translation between languages. Essentially, AI is categorized into 3 different categories: narrow intelligence, general intelligence, and super intelligence. Narrow intelligence today is where we are at today. Actually, it's very simple action. It's basically being able to mimic specific actions that you're telling it to do, right? Like to transcribe an audio call or to do this specific thing, right? You're training the engines on one specific model. You're training the engines to do one specific outcome, one result. So really it's based on that. You can also string these cognitive engines or these patterns that you're telling these AI models to do together, but it's really being based off a lot of training. And this is where we are today, right? We're pretty far along. As we move into general intelligence, that's when the AI can start thinking like a human, right? Starts to kind of have that human cognitive behavior. It doesn't necessarily, like you and I, right? We can go ahead and respond to things based off an action that's being taken. So with no sense of cue, it automatically understands the context, right? We're not even close to that to date, right? This is where it kind of, as we move into super intelligence, that is like robots, right? But where they can actually interact as humans, take human cognitive behavior, and do it very, very quickly, actually much quicker than a human. We're far, far away from super intelligence. So this just kind of gives you a good idea of where we are with AI today. It's really kind of in the basics. A lot of you, 83% of you got that today. We're living in that narrow intelligence world today. We're not even close to even being able to replace human behavior, which is more around general intelligence and moving into super intelligence. And so here's what we think about here at Veritone. When it talks about the human and the being on the loop and the different stages of when it gets to AI, in the loop, think of being in the loop as, you know, very much of a manual process. And Joy, you and I have talked about this a little bit, you know, how, you know, you can either do something very, very manual, you're not really taking advantage of the technology and being able to drive that efficiency. As you move with technology, as you transition with the AI, you can move from in the loop into on the loop, right? So now you're working with the technology, you're working with AI to drive efficiencies. This doesn't necessarily replace a human. You still need the human on the loop to support the AI and these different types of workflows as we continue to bring AI and technologies into the workspace. And then when you get into out of the loop, that's where humans are no longer essentially needed. But again, we're living in that narrow intelligence. So it's not to a place where the AI can be supported without itself, right, in the workspace, as you guys are starting to tackle these different types of workflows or requests from you from an eDiscovery perspective, right? It's really being able to leverage and be on the loop with AI and transitioning into that stage where a human is not necessarily doing all of the work, but they're driving the efficiency with the AI. And really there to essentially review and verify the work that the AI has done. Okay. And so one of the things that, you know, Joy and I were really talking about is that there's definitely this skepticism of when it comes to AI, right? The early adoptions around AI, obviously new technology is there. I know as something new comes up, we can be a little bit not safe to trust the technology. I don't know, Joy, have you felt that a little bit with your customers or, you know, at Practice Alliance Resources or just in your experience in the eDiscovery space, being able to see the transition of lawyers using no technology to using technology and leveraging technology?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think just from the practice side of it all, right? The concept that attorneys need to supervise the work that's being done on their behalf. And whether it's people like paralegals or if it's technology, you know, the concept of a black box and not really understanding how or what it's doing. I like that concept that you have in the loop, like you're doing it together in conjunction. So I think that's the key. Someone's question on the Q&A related to who should be driving it or who should be in control. And just to be clear in regards to legal, attorneys should be in control. I mean, they are the ones that ultimately are responsible for strategy and implementation, right, of everything that's going on. And, you know, in regards to technical competency, either knowing something, learning it, or hiring people who learn, who know it, excuse me. So to that end, I think when you talk about AI or just legal technology in general, forget even artificial intelligence, but even just going back to algorithms, when you're talking about algorithms and analytics, it sounds so, you know, how, you know, 2010, right? Space Odyssey, it sounds very out there, right? But when you bring it back to more common everyday things like, oh, when I'm watching Netflix, it knows that I like this movie and might like these other movies. Oh, look, I like that movie, right? So the concept of amassing tons of data points and patterns and looking at things that people do every day. So when we talk about leveraging legal technology or analytics or algorithms, you know, looking for those opportunities where you can work smarter, not harder. How many times have you done a repetitive function and you think to yourself, there must be an easier way to do this, or there must be something that can help me on this. And there is. And I think that when you talk about people not adopting, being an early adopter is very, very scary, right? First of all, it can be very expensive. Coming out of the gate, gosh, what was the first thing that we used to do with eDiscovery? Like, oh gosh, $1,700 a gigabyte or whatever it was, right? And so you can only see where the market is now in regards to leveraging technology. It's become more commonplace. It's become more acceptable. And also, when you look at how many cases have gone forward with using AI and being able to set out specific use cases, now you don't have to go through this hurdle and be a data scientist to explain why and how you're going to leverage technology versus going through standard workflows or things that have already been developed for you. So I think that's the difference now with being in the loop, right? Instead of outside of it, right?
Yeah.
In that, or on the loop. But the time and the cost part of it, I mean, as you look, as we see more and more cases for corporations go outside, looking at using diverse counsel, using smaller and different types of firms for different kinds of cases, not everyone's going to have 3,000 lawyers to be their law firm, and just to that end, we don't always put 3,000 lawyers on one case, right? I mean, it's going to be, you still have a case team of 5 or 10 lawyers. No matter how big you are, these cases do have some limit on budget and everything. So I think using technology and leveraging that is very important, no matter how big you are as a law firm or how small you are. Or from a corporate perspective, the problems with AI is that it wasn't applied in other areas outside, right? So now you have it in contract management, document assembly, even my vacuum cleaner, right? It has a little AI going on in it. And I'm like, oh, look how smart that thing is. So you're just thinking about it, that it has come a long way. And hopefully seminars like this and with tools like yours, it's really helping us bridge that gap by not making it that you have to be a computer scientist to understand. It is relayed back to what you need to do operationally as a lawyer.
Yeah, and I would kind of bringing that back, the history of what you just mentioned. At the beginning of when I first started talking about AI just in the group or learning about it, the things that you're seeing here on the screen, those were real, right? There was definitely a transition there. There was, ooh, what do I do? This is new. There was a lot of fear, but then also just not even able to transition with the technology. And now that we are in this space where we're taking advantage of the AI, we're in that loop, we're able to kind of get over these hurdles. We understand that. But I also just want to make sure for the audience that you guys are aware that these are some of the things that you will walk through, or you can have someone support you as you're walking through it that has already kind of used or leveraged the AI in a way that has received the outcome that they're looking for.
I was going to say one thing too, Karina, is that before, I don't know if it's here on this one, but you used to have to train the technology, right? Mm-hmm. And in general, like, we don't have time to train our own staff, much less train algorithms and train the system. Like, what do you mean 4 weeks? Who has 4 weeks to train a system? Mm-hmm. Now you're talking about, give me 5 documents, give me something, or you already have, like Veritone has libraries of stuff that's already kind of programmed in and trained. So I think that concept that there's a less barrier to entry because that training process it's already learned, right? And in some cases, so I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, then you're literally leading the witness here. So it's funny because, AI has absolutely exploded and they've become more and more niche, right? So definitely in AI, the world around AI, there's thousands and thousands of models out there. And at first, like you mentioned, Joy, it was very much kind of lenient on us, the users, to do a lot of the training up front. What we've seen is that a lot of these AI models or these engines, whether they're being used for speech to text or translations or OCRs or a part of the reviews or part of the contracting management system, is that the upfront work is a lot less because, we are becoming way more niche depending on the specific use case. And so you guys can see here that, on the screen that there's all these different shapes and sizes, if you will. And I want to be able to drive that home, right? The more niche that you can get around AI to solve a specific problem or a specific gap, the more higher accuracy you're going to reach, right? And we've actually seen that a lot of like the big dogs, like the Microsofts, the Googles of the world that talk about AI all the time, they were very generic, and that solved a very generic problem. It didn't solve our everyday little issues. So as we're seeing these AI models really transition and kind of become more specific, and kind of explode with a lot of different options depending on your types of data. I think it really does support the eDiscovery world, because the amounts of data that is now coming, but it's becoming a little bit different. There's different technology, different challenges, different gaps that we need to fill. Being able to kind of mold that with the right AI or the right cognitive engine, if you will, to support that use case, and having that faith that the technology is going to continue to evolve, because it is meant to evolve with us, not evolve away from us, if that makes sense.
And I was going to say that as these algorithms become more available through different systems in regards to like back operating system for some of these platforms, you're seeing more text, speech to text. You're seeing more OCR, or things that used to be an additional cost are now included. So I think it's really interesting of just being a part of our legal community. It's not as expensive, or it's only meant for special cases the way it used to be, right? Mm-hmm. How many voicemails are now coming through your mailbox and you can't search it right now for most people. So again, you've saved us many times where we've had to just ship audio files like, quick, we need this to be speech to text. And wow, it's just amazing on how affordable that technology is now and how quickly it turns around. And no one's touching it, like upload, download, oh look, everyone's happy. So I think it's interesting now as a lawyer and as a support person where we are today, where it was even 5 years ago. It is astounding.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I 100% agree. And you mentioned voicemails. I think we've had voicemails for a really long time, and now they're becoming something to search about. But I would also say that there's body camera footage, dashboard camera footage, surveillance video. I mean, our phones are recording all day long. We take videos like crazy. I love capturing moments, but that's just growing, and we're just growing in that way. So with that being said, we do have another poll question, and I want to take a second to make sure that we launch that poll and ask the community what their question is. So how many of you think you know AI is, and how does it work? So I know I covered a little bit about it, but I would love to hear from you guys. Where are you at with AI? Do you feel comfortable with AI? Are you very confident in AI? Or do you feel like you still don't necessarily have a clue to how AI works and how AI can essentially benefit you? We'll go ahead and answer that in a second to give you guys a couple more minutes.
And I think there was a Q&A related to that. So this is perfect timing.
Is there? Go ahead and so I'll answer this. It says about 32% are very, very confident and know how it works. 68 still think I know, but I can learn more. And 0 have no clue. So that to me sounds absolutely amazing, just because when I first started at Veritone, like 5.5, 6 years, I was, reaching out to law firms, corporate clients, all types of conversations. And it was very standoffish. So it's kind of nice to see that in the last couple years that, AI has become more familiar within this community. Joy, what was that question that they asked that was relevant to that?
I was just saying that most attorneys immediately bring up the absence of intuition and emotion in AI. How to grow trust in AI amongst attorneys?
Ooh, that's a really great question. I almost want to lean that up for Ben if he's willing to jump in here. That kind of reminds me of sentiment analysis, right? We get some kinds of requests for to be able to sentiment based off the emotion or their tone. And we haven't felt that we've seen AI get to that place, but we can actually build the building blocks to support that. Ben, would you like to add a little bit to that question?
Sure. So it is a great question. I would say today, based on the state of where AI is today and where it's going, it's not at that level where it can have that same level of intuition, especially at the emotional level that a human can. But at the same time, we're not using AI as a replacement for a human. It's really an augmentation. So if you think about it, a lot of the human intensive review time is spent going through and really filtering out the noise, if you will, and finding what's responsive to your case. And so now with AI, it can do that heavy lifting for you, but still keep you as a human user on the loop to supervise and give that final stamp of approval on the output. So I think when you take that approach, it puts a lot more safeguards, controls, and assurance of quality output into place.
Yeah. And I would just go back when you think about trusting AI, emotions and intuition, that's actually pretty extreme in regards to what I would trust anybody with, even a human. right? I mean, I'm like, oh, that's poor judgment. Okay, as a manager, right? I mean, but when you look at it, the question is, what are you using AI for? And what are you trying to, get towards faster? What are you leveraging technology for? And when we talk about, for example, trusting it, there are methods that we use to sample it, to test it, to look at what's not being put forth in a discovery response, or what is. If we are trying to, I mean, a lot of people are using search terms, and search terms are not perfect. And how do you go and say, I want to enhance what we already have agreed to? How do I go ahead and just again, I'm not going to just blindly deliver everything, but how do I complement that with the humans who are reviewing the documents? Or how do I serve up better documents faster? How do I serve up more hot documents or more relevant documents faster? Eventually you'll get to them. I think when we talk about leveraging AI, talking to the opposition about you are going to be using AI and maybe you don't feel so comfortable explaining it. No one says that you have to leverage AI to stop doing whatever you're doing. You can still do what you do, but now you're prioritizing the kinds of documents that are being served up to different groups of people. Maybe you can even take advantage of lower cost regions. Well, now everyone seems to be a little bit more on the remote side, but before pre-COVID, it would be, oh, I have to have all my review done here in Los Angeles. But hey, these documents that the computer says are 95% not responsive or not relevant, maybe we can put that somewhere else that it's a lower cost market for those attorneys who are going to review those. So just gives you some flexibility, gives you more strategies than you had before.
Yeah, and I definitely think that we need those strategies, right? We need those options. We need to think out of the box and be like, how can we leverage that? Because there is an increase of audio and video in lawsuits, and I know you and I can probably attain to this. There's a couple laws that have come out that have put a lot of pressure specifically on audio and video. And the reason why I want to talk about this too, because I think audio and video is still kind of strange to some people. They're like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go put that aside because I don't have time to review it manually, but I just don't know how to work with it. Versus like, we've gotten way more comfortable with reviewing documents and creating strategies around documents and different workflows around documents and that type of extracted data. But when it comes to audio and video, I think we do get a little bit nervous, and we are seeing a huge increase of audio and video evidence in lawsuits. I think a part of that is, for example, there is the New York discovery law in New York, where they have to essentially review and turn something over within 15 days, and they have to review a ton of audio and video files, and they have to redact that before giving it to the public. And so that has been something that puts a lot of pressure on New York, for example, and they are recording a ton of data. They've increased the amount of body camera surveillance video, and that same type of idea is kind of spreading across the states. And I don't know, Joy, you've experienced a little bit about this in California? I think there is a specific law that we've talked about.
Yeah, for us, we do work with government agencies and law firms that service public law. So, SB 1421, the concept of video footage and audio footage now being accessible to public records requests, I think that's a huge one for us. And I think being able to redact, protect private and personal information and personally identifiable information is very, very important. And also the speed to which we can do that means that access to justice and access to this information to the public is very important, right? It's not meant to identify a criminal or identify anything specific in that regard. It's meant to help us detect objects that need to be blurred, to identify people that are maybe like, oh, those are children or whatever it is. I mean, the concept of it's having a head detection versus a facial detection. I mean, identification. I think it's really interesting to understand the difference of those. But more so now, what I'm finding with COVID, it's not even just body cam footage. We have a lot of recorded Zoom meetings, recorded GoTo meetings, and recorded Teams meetings that are starting to be saved on your corporate network, right? And who's searching those? Some systems have some auto transcription already built in, great. But what about those who don't? What are you doing? What's on there that might, have an issue, right? So I think that's interesting as someone who is in charge of corporate records, HR, litigation in general for your information governance plans or litigation readiness. Really think about how COVID and working from home has change the landscape of your records retention policies. Some of these online meetings allow you, the user, to save those videos local, not even set it to save on the server of the corporation. So now you have corporate information or recordings on people's personal devices. So it's very scary, and it's something that you definitely have to address as we're coming out of COVID. I think people need to really look at their policies, not just by themselves with legal, but with IT, with the records department. I think this is an opportunity to really bridge and yet leverage AI, right? Saying, you know, I don't know what's out here, but maybe if we can just go ahead and have something crawl and, you know, suck in all this data and have a transcription, or, you know, let's go ahead and just run like an early case assessment across all this video. And, you know, in some cases, are there police cars in which video? Are there weapons in certain videos, right? I think that it's interesting on how, if I don't have a lot of time, how am I going to review 300 videos and see which one has, you know, weapons in it? And can I at least, I'm going to look at them all, but can you at least prioritize which ones I have to look at now?
I 100% agree. And this kind of just, you really leaned into, you know, how does AI address the main eDiscovery problems, you know, and I do know in eDiscovery, it's like, you need things yesterday. You know, the types of requests that we get is like, oh my gosh, I got 2 terabytes of data. How do I get through this? And, you know, I have to meet this deadline. I have to go back and negotiate, you know, how am I going to work through that? So being able to leverage AI in those situations, I think are really going to be super beneficial, right? So being able to eliminate the need for such a large workspace, which would drive down your costs, for example, by a lot, or being able to meet certain deadlines. So your timelines, right? You're able to kind of stick to your word. And I know that is so important because the attorneys want to know their deadlines, their timelines. There's always this, when is this going to be done? How can I get this done? Where are we on this? Blah, 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 blah. And so being able to work with AI in that way, as well as it really does eliminate the other part too that I want to talk about is how it decreases human error too. So sometimes when humans, I know in like the state and local side, they could be doing this for hours and working a lot of overtime hours. And so you can get really tired and that can cause human error. So being able to leverage, I know, me too. You can leverage the AI in that way to help with that. So I really just want to say that, you know, AI is meant there to help you drive through these gaps, through these challenges that you're facing. There's clearly going to be a transition in that, but it's like, how can we start getting comfortable with making this work? Because the more comfortable we can become with AI, we can directly address the eDiscovery problems that we're facing today.
And I want to add that, you know, because a lot of people aren't comfortable with the concept of using AI, they tend to wait until they get bids or till they understand, like, you know, oh yeah, we'll address that later. And all of a sudden the clock is ticking. And then all of a sudden it's an emergency. You have expedited fees. You're paying more and more people to work that overtime to try and do whatever. But there is a cost to doing this work in general. And if you are starting to look at your budgets with your clients about what the future is going to hold, I would look at things that you're probably going to, where are you going to need to leverage artificial intelligence or at least legal technology? I'll be honest, sometimes it's not so technical and artificial intelligence, right? But more so of, hey, a database, can we track information? But they're all about data points and looking at trends and understanding patterns and then how to leverage on top of that. So you may not think that your case right away is going to warrant something like this, but I'll say that family law is starting to introduce a lot of audio and video, you know, trying to collect cell phones. In a standard civil litigation, that can be quite expensive. But in family law, where budgets are different, or employment law, where budgets are different, you know, how are you going to get to this data? There are a lot of free tools out there, right? But what are you, again, doing to read all this information? How do you leverage all this? And then how do you make sure it's collected and preserved in a way that is forensically sound so you can use this in a way that is defensible? So I think that there's just a lot here. And anyway.
A lot to take back up,
Yes,
but I would even just leave it with like encouraging people to get comfortable with using AI on their smaller cases, you know, because I feel like it does get to a place where like, oh my goodness, I have this huge case now, I have no way. But, you know, incorporating it in your day-to-day as much as you can too, so then you can become more prepared for the events, like you said, that could be very, very overwhelming. So I think Joy, that's all for us to kind of dive into. We're really excited. We want to kind of show you guys a live product demo of what AI is capable of doing, kind of give you a good idea of general of the different kind of categories that you might see. And again, please feel free to keep asking any questions that you might have in the chat box. I'm going to pass it over to Ben, and then we're going to save some time, hopefully there at the end, like 5 or 10 minutes, to answer any other questions. So if something does come up, please feel free. So Ben, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen as I transition out of here somehow, and pass it over to you.
All right, thanks for the intro, Corinna. So now you guys should be able to see on your screen. What we're going to be looking at is a few different ways that we've applied AI here at Veritone, and really to showcase where AI is today. So we're going to walk through some examples. What you're looking at is an application called Illuminate, which is really focused in on the early case assessment of content. So if you think about where AI really plays a huge role in the process, it's going through a large corpus of data and quickly being able to find what's responsive to your case or your investigation. So if you look at the screen going across the right side, each of these different icons is a different way of searching within the system. So here at Veritone, we've built a platform where you can bring in all that corpus of data, be able to run different types of AI cognition on that data so that you can now quickly search, find the content you're looking for, and then take action on it. So let's say that we had a lot of audio files, maybe they're phone call recordings or wiretaps or something like that, that we just have to quickly be able to search through the transcript for. What we can do here is run machine transcription on this corpus of data, and now we can search that content for relevant content simply by typing in a word or phrase that was found. So in this case, I'm going to search for the phrase "killed him," and what that's going to do is narrow down the files to where that phrase was spoken in that conversation. So in this example, I'm showing an interview room recording, which has both a video and an audio element to it. But this could have easily just been a standalone audio recording. You'll notice that it jumps right to that moment where "kill him" was spoken. And now we can actually review the videos side by side with a time-synced transcript of what's being spoken. Let me play back a short clip of this for you.
I killed him. When I hit him and knocked him out, and then I took the shoelaces out of his shoes, tied them together, wrapped it around his neck, and strangled him.
So you can see how quick it is to follow along with the audio-based content, do that search, and you can also click into other parts of the transcript. Everything is time correlated here, making it really easy to ease that audio-based review of that content. So that's one example of how we've leveraged transcription to be able to help with the ease of audio review. Another option is when it comes to foreign language audio. So let's say that you had content in Spanish or some other language. And so what you can do there is still run transcription in that native language, not just English. But what you can also do is take that transcript now and translate it back over to English. And so now the resulting translation is side by side with the original transcript. You can search that translation to quickly call down, find what's responsive to your case. And so that's another way we are able to take translation on foreign audio, not to mention documents like emails and other text-based content. Going back to the search bar, some other ways of searching within the system. Let's say that you wanted to search by face. Oftentimes you're dealing with video content. Maybe there's hours of surveillance footage that's been collected, or maybe you have to be able to go through and search through millions of images off a hard drive or a phone. And so if you think about the traditional approach, you would either exclude that evidence from both sides and agree to do that, or you can actually go through and leverage an army of people to go through that content. Now with AI, what you can actually do is simply search for the name of the person of interest that you're looking for. So here I'm going to type in the name of this individual. And what I'm doing here is looking in a library of known individuals. So as part of the setup for this process, all I have to do is take a photo of that person and use that to train the facial recognition engine to now search and find that face wherever it appears. So now if I run the search, you're going to see that we get a mixture of both video and image content being returned. If I pull up this example in the result, you'll see that not only do I get the video that contains that face, but I can actually jump right to the 9-second mark in the video where that face appears, and I can start playing that back. So just like the audio transcription example we showed you earlier, you can now do the same time correlated search on video and image content and get exactly what you're looking for. So this is a game changer in terms of quickly reviewing video content as well as images. Along the same lines, you may want to search for other types of content on screen besides the face of a person of interest. Maybe you're looking for objects on screen, like looking for a weapon being seen on screen, like we talked about earlier, maybe a backpack, a vehicle, a person, etc. And so we have the ability to actually go through and search from a mixture of both pre-trained engines that'll detect common objects on screen. Like in this case, I'm searching for retails where we're seeing the inside of retail outlets and stores, or we can even do pre-training on specific objects you may want to search and find. So in this particular example, if I look at this body cam footage, you're seeing next to the video each of the different objects throughout each frame of video that have been detected, and now you can see the corresponding timestamp of where they appear. So here we can see, for example, retail, where we jump right to the part of the video. And now we can see the inside of a retail outlet. Or earlier on, there were cars and vehicles and other things shown on screen. So it just makes it really easy to quickly search through that video content and imagery without having to watch every second of it. In addition to things like objects, there's also being able to look for logos. Maybe the person of interest face is obscured from the camera, but they tend to wear a Nike cap, for example. So you can search for the Nike brand logo, find where that might appear across your content, again, across video and imagery, or even recognize text on screen. This can be everything from a license plate number on a vehicle to a picture of a scanned document someone took with their phone. So now printed, handwritten text can be searched using optical character recognition technology. So those are just a few of the many examples where AI engines or models can be used to really quickly cull through and find your content, process it at scale, and then being able to search and find what you're looking for. Now, what I'm going to transition over to is our Redact application. And so with this application, it's really focused in on the redaction use case. Let's say that you have audio or video content that is now subject to a public records request. Or maybe as you're going through the review of that evidence, you need to actually turn over that content for use in court. As part of that turning over process, you have to redact the personally identifiable information from the audio and the video content being seen on screen. And so now what we can do is apply AI to this redaction use case in particular. So what I'm going to show you guys is an example of what we do here in this Redact application. This is an example of a video of someone walking through a crowded street in New York City. And what you're going to see is a clip of how this automatic detection of those personally identifiable objects works. Let's play back the short clip. So I'm going to pause for a moment and point out a few things. You saw these green outline boxes appearing on screen. What that is it's automatically detecting these sensitive objects, including heads of people. And it's also going to be able to pick up things like license plates or laptop screens, anything that might be considered sensitive. So instead of having to watch every second of video and manually go through the frame-by-frame video redaction process, AI is going to do that heavy lifting for you, automatically detecting those objects. And now as a user, again, going back to the human on the loop analogy, you're able to review and supervise that final output. So now I can actually jump right to that moment in the video where that head was detected, and I can simply check or uncheck that box based on whether or not I wish to apply a given redaction. So that's an example of how head detection has been used along with other sensitive objects to quickly find and redact those objects for you on screen. You also see that it picks up the reflection of the person in the store glass window on the right. And so earlier on, we talked about being able to do what's called head detection, where it looks for a head on a torso, as opposed to looking for facial features being visible on screen. So while face detection could work for something like this on the left-hand side, where the facial features are clearly visible, for situations like this on the right, where the face is too far away or blurry, or here where the person's back is to the camera, or nowadays people have face masks on, all of those would pose a problem for face detection. And so being able to do something like head detection where it looks for just a head on a torso, regardless of the facial features being visible or not, makes a huge difference in these types of redaction use cases. So that's an example of how that's been applied in terms of the redaction use case. Now, when it comes to audio technology, we're able to run machine transcription to do that speech-to-text conversion we showed you earlier on. And so in the case of redaction, what we can do here is actually use the transcript as a visual map to find and remove sensitive audio being spoken. So now instead of having to listen to every second of audio, what you can actually do is search for a word or phrase that's sensitive, or even quickly skim through the transcript, and you can actually just click into any word to jump right to the moment in the file.
Penn State.
So you can see how it jumps to that moment in the file, starts playing back.
Florida football game that happened in Ireland a few weeks ago.
And it actually highlights each word as it plays back. So the point of that is that this entire transcript is time synced. So using that technology, you can actually say, I want to highlight this word or this phrase within the transcript that I just quickly verified as sensitive. And now I can do a right-click redact action. And so what that's going to actually do is take the start and end time in the audio track based off the text you've selected in your transcript. And it's going to plug in those values for you automatically and then mute or tone over that corresponding audio. So you can see how that approach greatly speeds up the audio redaction review process. We can also search for a word or phrase, find every instance of that throughout the transcript, right-click and redact every instance of that throughout the transcript as well. So now if I play this back, let's take a look at how that audio redaction sounds.
Registration's expired. Can I see your driver's license?
So it starts muting over that sensitive audio.
Going to get some stuff.
Come from home?
And then it starts playing back again. So these are the types of ways that AI has really been applied to speed up the redaction use case, the early case assessment use case, and all sorts of other scenarios to be discovered. So once you're ready to actually do the review on the redaction side, now we can actually play this back.
Stop date registration's expired. Can I see your driver's license insurance, please?
So you can see how it's following along and blurring the head automatically on screen. And then for the audio portion, it muted over that sensitive audio. So this approach to audio and video redaction, we've heard anecdotally that it saves anywhere from 5 to 10 times the normal human review time you would do on a frame-by-frame redaction process. So those are some of the things that we've heard and how AI has been leveraged. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Corinne, I'll turn things back over to you.
I think we have time for questions and answers, and there's a ton of questions for us. So would love to dive in. I think that was a great demo, by the way, Devin. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's answer the first question. I think there's two questions that are very similar to this question. So what is the standard deviation percentage of error of the AI bot would not detect or be an error of? I think that question is also in parallel to how would you describe the accuracy rate of AI like transcription or translation? So Ben, would you like to handle that question?
I'd be happy to. So accuracy is usually one of the first questions or objections when it comes to using AI. It really does vary depending on the quality of the incoming content. So let's take the transcription use case. If you had an interview room recording where it's in a controlled environment, every speaker is mic'd up separately and there's no background noise or people talking over each other, something like a deposition, for example, that's going to get very high accuracy, probably into the high 90s. Now, if you're talking about a body-worn camera video from, let's say, a police officer chasing someone on foot, there's background noise and shuffling, people yelling over each other, radio traffic, that's definitely going to lower the overall accuracy. It might be down to maybe closer to the 60, 70 percentile, depending on the quality of that content. So it does vary, and you really have to look at accuracy from the use case perspective. Now, if you're saying from a transcription, I want to be able to search, find content that's responsive, go through all these jail call recordings or something like that and find what's responsive to my case, then the search and discovery use case doesn't really care about a few words being missed here and there. It's really about, does it pick up those key words or phrases I would actually search by to be able to find that responsive content. And so that's one way of looking at the accuracy use case. If your use case is to be able to produce an actual transcript that's court certified and can be turned over to someone, that's where you probably would want some level of human review. You can start with the AI generated machine transcript result as a rough draft, and then you can edit it to 100% using built-in tools from applications that Veritone offers, for example. And so there's a lot of ways of taking the AI results, starting with it, and then having the human on the loop to edit it to that quality and accuracy you're looking for.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Veritone Redact does a really good job of that when it comes to video, right? So in Redact, right, being able to detect all the heads, obviously there's going to be moments where it doesn't detect the heads, but there's built-in tools where you can actually go in and detect the head yourself and track it through the entire film or the entire video, right? So again, it's keeping that human on the loop for the QC depending on the use case, but the technology is there to get you started, right? So you're not doing the whole thing manually or having to go back and do the work. So I think that was a great answer. The next question we have, I think, Joy, this one might be for you. How the jury is asking the question of who is the AI tech behind the evidence? The algorithm reflects the values and the beliefs of the algorithm author. Have you been called to testify? How would someone answer that question? I don't know if you can answer that.
Well, I think that number one, the tools that we're using aren't, again, used in a vacuum by themselves to specifically be the sole evidence or be something that, oh, this is all going to stand freestanding by itself. That we leverage AI to work hand in hand with humans. So these are being reviewed by people. They are evaluating what it's being selected. Again, sometimes it's just letting the cream rise to the top, and that we do eventually get down to the other ones where maybe we are having to review. Like you mentioned, some of that audio may not have any words at all. So we're going to focus on the ones that we get hits as a priority, and then we can actually release those faster. And then we still have to go through and have a human listen to things. I look at that also from a perspective of other systems where we're actually talking about documents. We are actually training the models with our documents that are part of the actual corpus. We're not using other people's material. We are actually taking our data and running the engines around across it to grab words, to look at how they're laid out on a plane, or again, it's all different on which algorithms you're using. But again, you are still training the system in regards to starting with 5 documents and 5 documents. And then as you review what's responsive or not responsive, it's looking at positives and negatives, and it is looking and trying to make determination based on whether it's, again, it's different on how different algorithms work, but how words are related to each other or not. Now, in the course of us using, for example, video redaction tools and things like that, it's jumping us to spots. It's highlighting, again, massive videos before we can know where to start. Do I start at the beginning? Let me pick this one. Let me start with the small ones because maybe I'll finish faster. You're just playing with your mind, which one am I going to go? It's so arbitrary versus let me throw it across, and things that are being asked for right away. Can I hone in on certain words? I have a deposition coming up and they're saying that, what can I do to make sure that we're finding evidence that can support the story? Whosever story it is, let's find it out. So in regards to testifying, I personally am using tools that have and disclose in regards to their expertise, data scientists, and so we will get people in the room. Most of the times what we are trying to determine is what is the confidence level or what is the margin of error that we've set for our stop when we stop reviewing something or stop doing something. And like I mentioned before, there are times when we don't even want to explain that because it's really hard if our teams don't even understand it, the judge doesn't understand it. We're going to review everything. We're just going to prioritize the way we do our work. So in that case, you still are having humans touch it. It just may be strategically divvied out a little differently or in a timeline handled differently. Let me think about in regards to someone mentioned about corporate having algorithms. I think there's a question here you're talking about. Yeah, talking AI at your company. So there are companies who, again, will have engines run across the corpus of their institutional documents. And they might be looking for different things. They might do it to triage what goes where in regards to records keeping and maintenance. It might be for a large corporation that's looking for whistleblower opportunities, for things that are tone and maybe just word choices. It might be a bank who's looking for inside job stuff or money laundering or whatever that is, right? So it's just really interesting in how there are so many libraries for the algorithms that go out there, and it's not one engine, right? There's just so many different things that you as an organization, or it's your data that you're going to work with whomever that company is to design and train that system to what you need. So, yeah.
Yep. And then I think that was a really good answer to the question about where you're getting the AI solution. So there's another question that's similar to this. It's like, do you have proprietary algorithms in programming the AI to sniff out specific data, specific discovery use, and is your platform, the client, uses the AI or uses AK lawyers to leverage it, or do you have access to the license? So I guess that's a specific question to Veritone or how you can access the different engines, right? And I can lead here, and Ben, feel free to clean up a little bit. But Veritone has built simply operating system of AI. We have over 500 different AI models in the platform. That is meant to essentially address different specific use cases, so you can actually build or string along, like I was talking about, the different algorithms together depending on the use case and what you're trying to solve. You can also build different applications on top of the AI. So you can leverage the AIs within Veritone because we standardize that, essentially that connection across the different algorithms, but then you can build your own applications on top of that to essentially fill the gap for any specific solutions that you're running into, as well as we've also built our own applications like you've seen today to solve specific workflows. The other thing too is that these AI algorithms are also open APIs, so you can cognitively enable the workflow that you would like to use to address a specific discovery issue or a specific discovery workflow. Ben, would you like to add anything to that? Did I catch that?
Yeah, I think you covered it great. The one thing I would say is one of the additional benefits of that aiWare platform is we're not locked into just a single AI provider. So some providers are very good at general purpose AI on, let's say, the transcription side of things. Other ones are more focused on broadcast quality. Some are focused on far field, low quality audio. And so there's not really a one size fits all approach. And so at Veritone, what we do is we look at each cognitive categories such as transcription, translation, facial recognition, et cetera. And then we really partner with the leading providers from around the world. So everyone from big names like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all the way down to smaller startups and everyone in between. And we take that best of breed approach, which helps guard against a lot of bias you might run into with just sticking to one algorithm only. And then we also allow you to even run multiple different engines under the same content and search across the aggregated set of data. So one engine might pick up certain words or phrases or dialects or accents better than the other ones. And so now by adding multiple engines on your content, you get that benefit of getting the combined result.
Yeah, that's great. And I would say too, when you start to dip your toes in the water with AI, it can get a little confusing as like, do I use this vendor? Do I use this vendor? Do I use that vendor? What do I do? Is it going to help my data? Or how come it worked on this data, but it didn't work so well on this data? So being able to have that flexibility in an adaptable platform or the algorithms all in single place, so we can help you find the algorithms or algorithm that works the best for your specific use case. Especially as AI starts to just continue to grow and get built in different ways. So being able to do that. The last question I think we have, we talked about the intuition, the emotions. There was one last question as to, since AI is the new shiny technology, a lot of companies are saying or claiming that they're using AI. What are some of the things I should look for or ask when I'm trying to find a company that uses AI technology? Do either of you want to take a stab at that one? I want to. No, I mean, I would answer that question as, what are some of the things I should use or look for? Definitely dive into the capabilities of the features of that technology, getting stuck, like I kind of mentioned, as you're searching for AI, is it going to only solve this one specific problem for this one time? Or is it going to help me apply that same problem across multiple categories? I think that would be one of my biggest guidelines, is like, kind of getting into a place of like, okay, what am I trying to solve first? And then when you are reaching out to different vendors or different AI models, doing the research on, is this going to only solve this, or is this also going to be able to help me solve other things? Ben, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, just expanding on that. I mean, if you look at the traditional approach to implementing AI at a company, it's you either have to hire a data science team and have them actually spend a ton of time and resources to build, train, test, and productionalize that AI algorithm, and then it becomes quickly outdated, right? So there's this maintenance upkeep you have to deal with, and oftentimes companies don't have the resources to really build that in to their process. So by partnering with someone like Veritone, who really handles that heavy lifting for you and constantly keeping up to date with the latest in technology, making them available to you from multiple different vendors, it helps guard against a lot of that and also takes away that early investment that is required typically with that approach. So those are some of the things to definitely look for. Don't just marry yourself to one provider or one vendor, because AI is evolving at a rapid rate. So you're going to want to make sure that you're really working with a partner that's going to take care of you for the long time to come.
Yeah, that is correct. I think those are all of our questions. If you have any last minute questions, you got 1 minute, because I know we have about 5 minutes left in here. I think, yep, 5 more minutes left to go. So if you want to go ahead and ask one more question, we'll go ahead and answer that one. But I did cover all of the 13 questions that came in through.
I did want to say and elaborate on it, what you were saying, Corinna, about your needs. I think a lot of people look at technology to solve the problem, but it's really kind of funny when you start talking to people, they don't even really know what the true problem is, right? Where is the pain point? What are you trying to solve? How do you do it now? What are you doing right now? Well, I don't know. Well, then how you're going to find a tool that's going to meet, that need. So really understand what the requirements are for the project you're trying to do. I have people who start to create databases or create their solution and ask, did you sketch it out? Did you kind of use the brainstorm portion here and write out in the perfect world, how would this look? What are you trying to achieve? Who are the stakeholders? Who else is going to benefit from this information? Or who else is going to throw a wrench in my plan at some point, right? Because, oh, I forgot about them. The data goes to this other side. So really, truly understand, what we're dealing with. So it could be budget. Honestly, a lot of times it's budget, what's going to cost us. And I think it's interesting how if you take a kind of a quick approach to that, it's going, what is the immediate cost of the technology versus what is the cost of doing this now for people, infrastructure, learning, training, or mistakes? How much are those mistakes costing us? The rework, the reputation, the risk of whatever we're doing, what does that cost us? And I think that if you can plan, we're saying now with COVID, we're 5 years in advance in some people's technology strategies that they've planned, that we've accelerated that. So now is a good time to think about, oh yeah, what if flash forward 5 years, what would I have wanted? Use your imagination and saying, you know what, maybe we don't have as many employees, or maybe we don't have as, in regards to resources, what do I do? What do I have, and where can we leverage technology? And just kind of work and look at this process, not even at technology.
Definitely. All right, one last question. Maybe we can all answer this is, what is the coolest AI use case that we've seen in legal or in eDiscovery? I don't know, Joy, do you want to talk about?
I was going to mention my vacuum cleaner, but that's not going to work.
Yeah, the coolest AI technology that you've seen.
Okay. Well, I think the newest type of work for us has been, not to just pitch you, but it really has been, you guys, and in regards to Veritone for audio and video, that it's not just the body and chest cams anymore. As I mentioned, a lot of our corporate and our criminal cases are coming in with things that are audio and video that's not searchable across normal platforms, and they're not ready to, buy technology that can phonetically search across, it's kind of a big leap in regards to that technology still. So I just find that having and leveraging tools like yours, it's important to know that you exist, and it's important to know when you have that, you can do that. And so I think, we've reviewing documents for discovery, I think everyone's used to that, but they come across all this audio voicemails and they keep it to the side. It's not searchable immediately, right? So is there something on there that's key? I remember looking up a case and the articles kept talking about the voicemails that these people were leaving. I'm like, are you searching voicemails? What do you mean? Well, all the articles in the newspaper about your case is mentioning voicemails that your managers are leaving for people. Where are those voicemails? You know how much voicemail we have? I'm like, I don't know. What are we going to do? So anyway, I think it's really interesting that we have always kind of left things to the side, leave it to last, and not worry about it instead of leveraging it as a sword, right? Instead of waiting and trying to protect yourself as a shield. So.
Definitely, I love that.
Thank you.
I know we only have one last minute, but I think we're good to go. I think that was a really great question. The beautiful thing about AI that I've seen is that there's a lot more than what you think is possible. So really being able to search out there and see what you have. Oh, another one. Have you, if we have a minute, I don't know if we'll have time for this, but have you AI vendors been involved in a private dispute monitoring parties of certain conduct over the next 2 years? AI is a great tool, but most attorneys do not understand the AI potential. Are you involved in developing a private dispute framework? Not that I know of. Their AI is a great tool. But I do agree with you that, attorneys don't understand the AI potential. And I think that just comes from a lot of resistance, like internal resistance to the technology. So this is why we're doing things like this, where we can go ahead and try and educate as much as we can. And I know we're at the time, so I really did appreciate everyone here today. I hope you really were able to learn everything. And thank you so much for ALM for hosting us on this virtual webinar.
Thank you, Corinna, and a formal thank you to our speakers for this session. That's all we have for you in the Legal Week Year May series, but be sure to save the date for our series finale, which will take place on July 13th and 14th. Those with full access passes will be able to access on-demand content shortly. Thank you to all of the sponsors, speakers, and thank you for attending this week's Legal Week Year session.